All right, Bryan Curtis is here. You can hear him on the press box. He's the editor at large of The Ringer. We've been working together since 2011. We have some conflicts of interest to disclose before we do this part of the podcast. Zach Lowe, who worked with us at Grantland, who I think was the best all-around basketball person who did this in the NBA, was let go by ESPN today. It was a layoff. It was another ESPN layoff. And, there's been a few of these. It's not like I've done a podcast every time, and obviously I'm friends with Zach, but it just felt like there's a moment here with ESPN that I felt like we should hit, and you agreed, and we're just going to talk about it. So what was your reaction when you heard?
The first reaction was, wait a second, you just renewed the NBA rights for $2.5 billion, and then you laid off the best NBA writer in America in the same breath? That really happened? Like a week and change after the biggest NBA newsbreaker in America left the network? And, that was the first reaction. And then the second reaction is something you and I've said over the years as we've seen these layoffs and people walk out the door of Bristol is, if ESPN doesn't have room for Zach Lowe, who does ESPN have room for?
And who do they want in the room?
It's kind of the question, isn't it?
It's clearly a strategy, and they clearly value certain things. And I think, everybody gets mad anytime something like this happens. And, and I get it. But to me, it's more interesting what the strategy is and what they're thinking and where Zach fit into that. Because obviously, they had an issue with this 10 years ago when I was there. Like, they didn't know how to monetize podcasts. They didn't know how to get real value from them. Zach's biggest value is as a writer and a podcaster and a steward of the game, and also somebody who can go on TV and be good. But it seems like what they value now is people who can do TV hits first and foremost, and hits that you can cut into 70 to 90 second videos that can go on their website or go on YouTube. And the better the headline is for those hits, that seems to be where the value is. And I'm not besmirching some of the people that do that stuff. I'm just saying that seems to be how they value it. It's either that or the giant names, which you've covered many times in Ringer pieces, like getting the best possible people to cover a football game, right? Spending money in the high-end talent. I'm sure they're going to bring back Stephen A. Smith. But I think that's what they're becoming. I think what's so fascinating to me is that it's the opposite of where they were 10 years ago, when they seem to try to want to be everything, but also really have, I guess, for lack of a better word, a soul. I'm not sure what the soul is going to be if this is what your strategy is. So that's my big take.
First of all, we should congratulate Zach for inaugurating a whole new era of television where you would come on television in your sweats. Remember, he was doing that even before COVID. It would be a TV hit and everybody be in their suits, and we'd see Zach from his apartment and you'd be like, look at that. That guy looks slightly different than people I'm used to seeing on TV. Now that's what we all do on Zoom. No, so I completely agree with you. And I think the strategy is fascinating because ESPN, like every other media company in America, is walking across this bridge from the world of cable television to the world of streaming and over the top. And they're making a decision, who's coming over the bridge with us? Who do we want to be part of this new world? And they've picked a couple of big guys, the Stephen A's and the Pat McAfee's. They've picked a ton of sports rights, which they've done a good job signing up. But the interesting question to me is, like, this all feels very TV oriented to me. It feels like we're getting people to do these TV hits, even though we're kind of admitting we're not really a TV company anymore. If Zach's value, if you're saying, well, we can't see the value of him as like a TV guy cutting up those 60-second clips that now dominate the website. But isn't there money to be made with a Zach Lowe NBA podcast? Like, isn't that?
Apparently not. If ESPN's selling it.
I just find that weird.
But it's not, listen, it's not their business. And what you've seen a lot of that from a lot of the stuff they've been doing the last 5 years is outsourcing stuff, right? Omaha is producing more and more shows for them. It's kind of insane. Why aren't you producing your own shows? Why are you constantly, like, Connor left and his company does a bunch of 30 for 30s and produces the ESPYs for them. It's like, why aren't you guys doing this? So on the one hand, they're outsourcing a bunch of stuff. And then as concurrently, they seem like they're throwing away at least the podcast piece of everything. They have podcasts. They have a bunch of them, but it doesn't seem like they care, because if they cared, they would have kept Zach. So when you talk about this new world that they're entering, the world is sports rights and just enough people to seem like you're still the biggest. Is that what it is?
It's totally flipped, hasn't it? Because remember old ESPN, they didn't really have the games you wanted to watch, but they had the people you wanted to listen to. And new ESPN now has all the games you want to watch. They have the Super Bowl in 2027. They have the NBA Finals. They have all these huge packages, but they don't really have the people that you want to hear talk about the games a lot of the time. Still plenty of good people there. I don't want to write everybody off. By the way, how many times have we been playing that game, you and I, over the last 10 years, where we say, you know what, at least ESPN has, and then we fill in the blank with somebody everybody likes.
Dots, yeah.
At least they still have Mina. At least they still have Wickersham. Man, Zach was on that list before today. And that list is getting really, really small.
But what's the point of having hardcore feature journalism at this point anymore? So you're going to dabble in that every once in a while, but not always have it? Or you're going to have some of it? Or you're going to have a new version of it? That's another thing. My point is, I don't understand the strategy. I feel like I've always understood at least somewhat what they're doing. And now it seems like their strategy is 5 different things happening at the same time, because now they're on the gambling side too, right? So they got in super late on that, probably like 4 years too late. Doesn't seem like they're in on podcasts the same way. Seems like they're really in on the YouTube, TikTok, all that social stuff. And that seems to be the thing they point to when they talk about success things. They also talk about how the ratings are up, but we all know the ratings are up because they started counting bar TVs and airport TVs and things like that. The ratings aren't actually up. It's just the way they count the ratings. It's more people. But I do wonder, like, to me, the next one is PTI. What happens with that show? Because we're seeing a certain shift toward a certain type of content. And where does PTI and 2 old guys that are beloved and, institutions at the place who are one of a kind, and the show is always the best when Wilbon and Kornheiser are on it, where do those guys fit going forward? And this is the first time I wouldn't be surprised they're just like, yeah, we got rid of Wilbon and Kornheiser.
2 guys that were done. Grandfathered in, no offense to Mike and Tony, from another age of television. But to me, the whole daytime ESPN is a real question, right? Because when in the cable TV universe, what did you do? You just turned on ESPN. And for a lot of it, was just on all day. So that floated a certain kind of programming during the day. Is that going to exist when we get into streaming world? At 4 p.m, just when there's not a game on, you just like, I just want to put ESPN on to be the background noise. So I think you're right. Like, that show doesn't fit in with what the Pitaro regime vision of ESPN has been. But I also just think ESPN is probably just changing in a very, very fundamental way. And I don't know how much daytime ESPN there's going to be, because that's really one of the only things left besides Around the Horn.
Well, we haven't seen streaming sports stuff, just talking head stuff, work for people. Like, I will go to Peacock and watch this. I will go to Paramount and watch. People aren't doing that. Oh, Max has that. They don't. But people are in the habit, and maybe this is older people, and maybe it's not people 25 and under, of, I'm just going to put ESPN on. And I wonder if maybe that's starting to fade too. So it just feels like it's getting louder and more distinct. But on the other hand, they're still taking swings. Like, they're spending more money on the Manicast, right?
Yeah.
They took a bunch of swings with their NBA coverage. None of them worked. They went and they spent money on Doc Rivers. Like, they doubled down on JJ. They were paying Woj as much money as anybody. But now you think, like, the last year, just NBA in general, the last year, they lose Doc, they lose JJ, they lose their lead color analyst twice after firing Van Gundy, right? Woj is just gone. Now Zach Lowe's gone. It's kind of your brain spinning. And now I guess what we're going to get, and I like Stephen A, so this is not a slight at Stephen A, and I really think he's a good guy, but it feels like they're moving toward, it's a Knicks playoff game. Here's Stephen A's entrance. And that's kind of what they think people want. And I don't think they're right.
No. How did that go over with Jason Kelsey during the Eagles game the other day? And people were just like, I don't want this.
They were
too
trying
much.
so hard. Yeah. And I like Jason Kelsey, but I didn't like the way they used him. And then he stayed in the booth, and it's all of a sudden Aikman's gone from a game that was really good. Cause as soon as somebody's in a booth, they have to interview him. And Jason, nobody knows better than you that tush push, you just have to like figure out ways to work the guy in. It's like, fucking Aikman are the best announcing team we have. What are you guys doing?
Can we talk about the center some more? This is great. Great content. Keep going with this. I want to come back to your idea about the soul of ESPN, because I think that is like a really interesting question. Because when you write stuff like this or say stuff like this, ESPN will come back. But did you see the rights package we just signed? Did you see how we got the entire SEC, the entire college football playoff? But man, they have lost so many things about ESPN that made it unique over the last decade and plus. I put a list together a couple years ago when we did a piece about ESPN layoffs, one of the many stories I've read about it.
Yeah.
Dude, when you just look at the list, Simmons, Russillo, the Grantland gang. Okay, that's inside the house here. Yeah. Michael and Jamel, Dan Lebitard, Keith Olbermann, Wesley Morris, Matthew Berry, Mark Stein, Chad Ford. You want to keep going? Chris Felica, Tom Rinaldi, like Mike Tirico. Did I say Tirico already? No. Adam Amin, Jason Benetti. I mean, like Bomani, both Mike Golics. Like I could go on and on and on.
Just think 3 Mike Golics. I think there's 4 Mike Golics.
Many Mike Golics. Just think of how many people walked out the door. And again, your mileage may vary on some of those people, and I totally understand that, but it's like people have fewer entry points to get into ESPN, right? That was part of the cool thing about old ESPN. You could like this and not like this, but you'd still be in the ESPN mothership because you're like, I like Bill. I like Russillo. I like this. I like Mike and Mike in the morning. This is my entry point. Those people are all gone.
Right.
They're gone.
Well, you know what else was interesting about it is it seems like there's a certain, granted, Twitter is Twitter, but I did notice Zach was trending today, but it also said he was trending with Kendrick Perkins. And that was one of the interesting topics of this, right? Is that people were looking at this like ESPN is choosing this Kendrick Perkins direction of their basketball coverage over the Zach Lowe direction. I don't even know. I mean, look, there's a million reasons why something like this can happen, but I don't necessarily blame Kendrick for some of the stuff he says or the way he's trying to provoke people, because they're telling him to do that. If you're being produced a certain way, if you're being incentivized a certain way, and you're on TV and you want to gain more and more whatever power, you want to be on TV more, you want to make more money, you're going to do what the people are like, that was great. I loved what you said about how Jason Tatum isn't an alpha. Just stare in the camera and do that again for 90 seconds. And that's just the way this shit's going to go. So there's really like, for the people that bitch about it, just don't watch. That's really the only way any of this stuff's going to change. If you don't like this direction, wherever we're going, you don't have to watch it. I don't watch this stuff in the morning anymore. Do you?
No.
Are you watching their morning shows?
I'm so little. I mean, so little. And I only see the clips. And then it's that 45-second clip you're talking about. Perk goes off on Jason Tatum. And I'm like, okay. But look, it's not, you're right. It's not a 1-for-1 trade. You know, it's not like they say, okay, we can either pick Perk or we can pick Zach and only one of them can stay. I don't think it quite works like that, but it's not that either, because just like you said, they figured out what they want, right? Some of those people are good, Orlovsky, people like that, but like, we want that guy who can give us 45 seconds, really good meaty seconds. And then we're going to put that on the website. That's going to be the new article for us. Other articles,
like right now, there's a video, Perk. Nobody is scared of the Celtics, with a picture of Perk and Jason Tatum. It's like, what? Nobody's scared of the Celtics? Click. That's kind of where we're going now. And I don't know. Maybe we're like the older people now who are nostalgic for some era that's just gone anyway. But I do feel like, especially when we were there 10 years ago, like they did care about the big picture of some of this stuff. And now it seems like they intermittently care.
See, I don't feel like an old guy on this, because like you and I being old guys be like, where's the original edition of the Sports Reporters? When it had the guys from the Chicago Tribune. That's what I wanted to see. Right. We're talking about Zach freaking Lowe, man.
Yeah.
If you want to reach young basketball fans, isn't that one of the ways to do it?
Yeah, and also like somebody that was a thought leader and inspiration to a whole generation of people, and also a fucking awesome guy. Like, right? We worked with him. Like, the guy gives a shit. He puts in his time. He He's not a look at me. He's a really generous teammate. He just does there's just so many good things that come with working with that guy that if you don't appreciate that, that's nuts. I just don't understand that. But, part of me wonders, like the evil side of me wonders, do they do this knowing somebody else is going to pick them up and they're just off the hook? It's almost like when baseball teams leave, their right fielder unprotected on the waiver wire, knowing somebody might actually claim them. The whole timing of this is weird. He was the only guy that they laid off right before this whole end of the quarter thing. Nobody else was in it. They're back channeling and telling people, no, this is part of the RG3 Sam Ponder thing. It is? Why didn't you do this 2 months ago then?
Yeah.
You're doing it right before the NBA season? He was on NBA Today. He did a podcast with JJ Redick yesterday. So what are you doing?
It's funny, to your point, like I had somebody text me today. It's like, it's not a bad time to be an NBA media free agent right now, given what's happening with all the rights. There are people out there in a year who might going to want people.
I've heard that, but like, look at Amazon's NFL coverage. There's no reporter on that stuff. They just have ex-players and a host.
Is this Albert Breer erasure, Bill?
Well, but you know what I mean? Like, it's not like there's going to be 40 jobs. It's not like they're going to have some whole universe built around like reporting stuff. And I don't know. I wish I could explain ESPN, and I just can't. The gambling thing, I think, was the first sign that maybe they were just outright missing on stuff, And when you just have to keep doing this over and over again and rebooting who you are and what you're trying to be, now they've pinned themselves in a position with Stephen A. where they basically have to keep him.
Oh, absolutely.
He can name his price, and
he's coming across the bridge. I mean, like I said, when we're talking about people who are going to be part of the new ESPN, Stephen A's part of it.
There has to be. But there's also like a little bit of a lawlessness that, as somebody who was suspended for 3 weeks and suspended on Twitter a couple times, and
wait, what?
I look back at some of the stuff I did. It wasn't 1/10 as bad as some of the stuff that people are doing now. Like Ryan Clark, like openly challenging them about his extension. I'm just not. Do they have bosses? What's happening?
But this is the thing, right? It's the players coach year of ESPN too, where the people we pick them, and we kind of just let them do what they want. We're not worried about,
including if they want to have a sex tape on Instagram.
My God.
That's fine. I'll look the other way on that one. Is it going to be a First Take Tuesday? Okay, cool.
Oh, we're good. My God.
Unc was getting it on. I just don't understand it. Like, who's in charge? What are you trying to do?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I say. And again, like I said, every time I say these words, and we've had some moments here. I believe I had a column called ESPN's Year from Hell a little bit earlier in 2024. Look at the sign. Just sign the sports rights. Just re-sign got the whole college football playoff. I mean, that's what ESPN is now, right? It's the games you want to see. If you're looking for a strategy, the strategy is the games you want to see, a handful of guys who host talk shows, and we'll figure out the rest.
Well, I wonder if it's almost like what happened with movies in the 2000s. So they're like, let's just do franchises. Let's instead of spending money on these 10 movies and hoping one of them hits, let's just go get a fucking DC Comics thing going, and we'll make Lethal Weapon 7, and we'll just do some sequels, and let's everybody turn our brains off and not try to make good stuff.
Well, it is
ESPN's
funny.
version of that is sports rights. Like, hey, we have all the sports rights. It doesn't really matter who's announcing them except for football. And it doesn't really matter what the shows are around them because people are going to watch the games anyway, and we're fine.
Yeah. I do come back to, like, you just spent so much money on the NBA. So the NBA is one of your franchises. That's one of your Marvel franchises at ESPN. So don't you want the best people around it, even if they're not, Mike Breen? Like, surely you want other people around there.
But they just had the most roller coastery, rocky kind of behind the scenes year ever covering the league last year, right? Did it ultimately matter? People are still watching. They're like, oh, I'm not watching Game 4 tonight. There's too much chaos at ESPN. Like, people don't care. Like, ultimately, they could have, like, JJ's leaving, and they have Woj reporting on it, and it's this whole basically internally created soap opera around the Laker job that they're just getting clicks out of, and it was annoying, but it didn't stop people from watching the finals.
Now you're sounding like the ESPN management because you're going, oh, well, it doesn't matter. We'll just, as long as we have the games.
I'm just trying to figure out what they're thinking. Yeah. And I think that's what they're thinking. It's like, guess what? People are going to watch sports and the UFC deal is going to come up. We're going to redo that. And we're going to have UFC and we're going to have NBA and we have college football and we have WNBA now, which is growing big time, and on and on and on. And we have sports all the time. And that's why people come. And we've done 1 million research models on this. And this is what people want. Where they missed was the ESPN bet because they just got in too late. They have no chance with that.
I completely agree. But you know what? This sucks because it's Zach. And Zach's great. So it just sucks, like it's not fun. And it's not, again, your soul just got to keep coming back to that word because you just look at ESPN like, I want to visit ESPN a little bit less today. It's not going to die. ESPN's not over. There's no need to go in for the full think piece treatment here, but it's a little worse today. Maybe a lot worse without him.
What do people say? Because you talk to everybody and, you've been at the forefront of smartly writing about sports media and not going crazy and not getting caught into like, I have this scoop, but just trying to write big picture takes about where things are going and where things are leaning and where things are moving and what little trends are happening and trying to explain why this happened, incorporating the history of things. When people talk to you about ESPN, what are like the most common things they ask you?
Well, it's interesting because before, I think 10 years ago and certainly like 15 years ago, it felt like the ultimate destination. And especially became in the 2010s, the ultimate destination for sports writers, not just for people who wanted to be the next SportsCenter anchor, which was kind of a funny flip, right? ESPN became the worldwide leader in sports writing for a pretty long patch there. And you and I were both a part of that. You obviously much more than me. But what's funny is when I talk to people now, very few of them talk about ESPN as a place they aspire to work at. And it's not that they think ESPN's bad. I just don't think they think that's attainable anymore.
Right.
They just don't see that as like a logical pathway. Because again, if you don't have room for Zach, well, do you have room for me? It just doesn't compute. So I think for a certain type of person, it's just not even on the bingo card anymore as a place they would work.
The other piece of it, and we'll see if Shams is a part of this, whether they want to stay in the information business in the post-Woj era. And some people in my life were like, Woj, maybe he knew he was getting laid off and they gave him a heads up and he got out. That's not what happened. I think he was genuinely, there's no conspiracy theory on Woj. I think he was burned out and I think he just wanted to do the St. Bonnie's thing. Felt like he made enough money. But this information culture that they've created where all that mattered was getting those scoops, which you and I never really understood. And I'll be interested to see if they break away from that or not. I think the big scoops matter, right? Mm-hmm. If somebody's getting traded, like a major player is getting traded, if a team's getting sold, if somebody's going to retire. But when it comes down to Isaac Okoro has signed a 3-year, $38 million extension negotiated by Bryan Curtis of Curtis Agent Media. No, that's where you lose me. So I wonder, are they going to double down on this information era or maybe start shifting away from that too? My guess would be they'll start shifting away.
Maybe. Can you think they can unhook themselves from the machine that they hooked themselves up to with Woj and Schefter and Jeff Passan and everybody else?
What's the upside of it? So the upside is you're not being embarrassed that other people are getting the scoops, right? But yep. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit, like at the Ringer, like we've never cared about that stuff because our theory was always, well, the stuff will come out and then we'll react to it, right? We want to have the best. This happened. What do you think, people? We don't really care if we have the people who are burning the phone lines trying to break information. So I guess from ESPN standpoint, I know it was important to have Woj. On the other hand, that a lot of the stuff was his Twitter feed, which isn't on ESPN, and they're not really able to monetize in any way. Now he can give them a heads up, stuff's coming. He can do like a Monday morning, I'm about to do this, nobody has it, get ready. But for the most part, I unless it's like a giant thing, I don't really see the upside. I don't personally get it. What do you think?
I never have. I mean, I've never seen it other than what you mentioned, which is having the name of a rival media company on the bottom line, where you have to credit them when they break something, which is
Right.
obviously what drove them nuts
Yahoo's
about,
Adrian Wojnarowski reports ...
which completely, drove them bonkers when they had to do that. But I had Fantasy on Press Box last week, and we were talking about this, having almost the same conversation. He's like, I don't get it. Not only why do you necessarily want that, why do you want somebody at that price point that you have to pay them to be the ultimate insider?
Yeah.
Because, even if it's Shams coming over, that's going to be a lot of money. I mean, that's millions of dollars, right? Like that's what the price to get him is going to be. So here's the time of the company when it's tight, when you're trying to cut talent salaries. Do you want that much money just to have the pride of not having it on the bottom line? Is that it? Because you're going to
I think that's literally it. I don't think there's another reason.
I mean,
I think it's about, if we're supposed to be the worldwide leader, how do we not have this stuff? But, I think what happened to Woj's career the last 15 years is pretty informative, right? From 2010 to 2014, he was a really fearless basketball journalist, right? He operated a lot like how Matt Bellany is writing his Hollywood column now for Puck. Like he was really well sourced, but he also didn't play favorites, he didn't favor trade, didn't do any of that stuff. And within 10 years, favor trading was the business. And I honestly feel like that was part of the reason he probably got out, because I think in your DNA, if you want to be a reporter and you want to be fearless, to shift the other way, where now everything is a favor trade, I don't know how you can do that for that long.
It's funny. I was talking to Sean about this the other day, but the amazing thing about insiders to me is also you can never say, I don't know. When something breaks or when there's something going on, you can never come on television and be like, I don't know the answer to the question.
Right.
But we know as journalists, even if we think we have sources, there are times when you just don't know. You really don't.
I would say there's a lot of times.
A lot of times, right? But there's this idea that not only do you have to I can't take my phone in the shower, or whatever that thing you were laughing about the other day was, but you just can't say, I don't know, because then all the magic disappears. You're not the almighty insider anymore. What, you don't know? You don't know what's about to happen? And to me, that's always just like what? Just a strange existence for anybody to be in.
Well,
much less a journalist.
Part of me is thinking, if this does end, there are some benefits, right? Like we could watch an NBA or NFL draft and not have every pick spoiled, right? We could have TV pregame shows where we don't have to awkwardly shoehorn the insider to be like, I am hearing that Memphis is very interested in a center. And we could, I don't know, just talk about other stuff. But the big picture point, we're heading into 25 with this new streaming only ESPN thing. And it just feels like this is the Zach Lowe moment feels like something we'll remember, where we're like, remember ESPN was creeping this way and then they laid off Zach and then they went this way. And I think I see that, and it feels like you do too, which is why we want to do this segment.
I do. It feels important, right? Even if, again, that whole list I just gave you of people that have walked out the door, for some reason, this one hits a little bit differently. It does. And maybe it is. Maybe it's the beginning of something. Maybe we'll look back when we look at ESPN 2030, where holograms are doing Sports Center and the AI write-ups have gone way beyond what they're doing now, that this will be a moment. I totally can feel that.
Oh, they have some good stuff going still. They still have all the rights, which is really the only thing that matters. They whiffed on ESPN Radio. It seems like they've whiffed on the podcast business, but the YouTube and the TikTok and the Snapchat and you name any sort of thing that has risen over the last 12 years, they're in there in the best possible ways. And maybe that's their business. And maybe people like us just don't see it. They obviously see some sort of vision that's different than I think what we see. Maybe we're the dinosaurs.
Like I said, I feel like the old guy with you sometimes. I don't feel like the old guy right now. I don't defending Zach Lowe doesn't make me feel old. That makes me feel young, if anything.
How about Skip Bayless unemployed? That's got to make you feel old.
Did I put his name on the list of people who walked out the door the last 10 years? There's another one.
Yeah.
There's another one.
Yeah. The end of the Skip Bayless career is that's something.
Oh, my first guy when I was a kid, man. Let me tell you.
That would have been a great 8-episode podcast series that only 7 people would have loved. Like the rise and whatever of Skip Bayless, but going into those Dallas Cowboys years.
Oh my God.
He wrote 3 Cowboys books in like 5 years.
And
I have all of them, and so do you.
Really good.
Yeah,
Oh
they're
my
actually
God.
really good books. They got kind of a bad rap. It was just that era where you could just get crazy inside access with the football team, or you didn't know how true some of the access was, but that's what made it fun to read.
He told me one time when the Cowboys did their first Super Bowl in the Jerry Jimmy era, he had breakfast with Jerry Jones the day of the Super Bowl. Just think about that now.
That's
at the
crazy.
hotel. Yeah, that happened.
Are you worried about the Cowboys?
Hell yes. Are you kidding? Actually, not worried. Resigned.
We're taping this before the Giants game. They might beat the Giants like 45-10 today.
I'm the opposite of Cousin Sal, where he's like having the flicker of hope, keep hope alive. I'm just resigned. I mean, I'm out. I just think it's done. I know. I still think there's like a 9-win slip into the playoff scenario, but that's about all I'm hopeful for.
By the way, I had a nitpick. You and Fantasy did your top campaign movies.
Okay.
On your pod. Dave is not a campaign movie. Dave's being an office movie. That's fucking cheating. There was no campaign in Dave.
CC Sean Fantasy.
Well, that's just A, lazy, and B, he cheated, which is par for the course with that guy.
You can't just trust him on movies.
You can't. He's going to try to win with however he does it. Dave, where's the campaign in Dave? Did I miss it? Was it a deleted scene? He's just in office. What the fuck is he doing? Come on, Fantasy. Curtis, good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Bill.